Nelson Mandela, freedom forged in prison. The boy who would move a nation came from red soil and round huts, from riverbanks, cattle, and the stern wisdom of elders. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born in Mvezo on July 18, 1918. After his father's death, he was taken in by the Thembu regent, Jongintaba Dalindyebo, raised in a royal court where he learned that leadership is not loudness, but listening. There was little wealth but much expectation. In that home, young Mandela learned the cadence of consensus and the cost of defiance, lessons that would one day echo in prisons and parliaments alike. At Fort Hare University, the premier school for black South Africans, Mandela found both politics and purpose. When a student protest broke out in 1940, he joined. He was expelled. It was his first act of civil defiance and his first taste of consequence. At home, an arranged marriage waited. Instead, he and his cousin Justice fled to Johannesburg. There, he worked as a mine security guard, then a law clerk, studying by night and surviving by conviction. Johannesburg gave him more than a job. It gave him comrades and a cause. With Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, he helped launch the ANC Youth League in 1944, pushing for mass action instead of polite petitions. After the Sharperville massacre in 1960 and the government's ban on the ANC, the struggle hardened. By 1961, the underground movement Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, was born. Sabotage, not submission, became the language of resistance. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. At the Rivonia trial, facing a possible death sentence, he delivered words that would outlive the trial itself. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. He was sentenced to life in prison. 18 of those years were spent on Robben Island. The sun burned white off the limestone quarry. Prisoners inhaled dust that scarred their lungs and stole their sight. Mandela's mother died in 1968. His son Thembekele in 1969. He was denied permission to attend either funeral. Each man was allowed one 30-minute visit and one heavily censored letter every 6 months. But the worst punishment was not isolation. It was invisibility. Yet even there, Mandela refused to run when ordered. If they say you must run, he told his comrades, insist on walking. Dignity, he taught, is a discipline. Even in chains, one chooses how to move. The quarry became a classroom. They debated politics, law, and philosophy under the cover of labor. They studied the language of their jailers, Afrikaans, to understand, not to imitate. They called it the University of Robben Island. Mandela led quietly. He listened more than he spoke, built consensus, and insisted that even protests be run with rules. He made discipline a form of freedom. In 1982, he was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison, then later Victor Verster. The world saw silence. Behind the walls, negotiation began. In 1985, Justice Minister Kobe Coetzee opened secret talks. In 1989, still a prisoner, Mandela met the state president face to face. 5 years later, South Africa's gates opened. In 1990, Nelson Mandela walked free, unbent, unbroken, unbitter. The years that followed were not fairy tale. They were construction. He led the negotiations that turned rebellion into democracy. In 1993, he and F.W. de Klerk shared the Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1994, millions of South Africans, many voting for the first time, chose Mandela as their president. As president, Mandela built what he had practiced in prison, a politics of forgiveness. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission allowed victims to speak and perpetrators to confess. Imperfect, yes, but it placed truth, not vengeance, at the center of healing. And then there was the image that went around the world, Mandela, wearing the Springbok jersey once reserved for white pride, handing the World Cup trophy to Captain Francois Pienaar. The roar that followed was not just for rugby. It was for a country learning briefly to see itself as one team. Mandela once said, "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." He knew freedom is not a finish line, it's a discipline renewed each day. The prison that was meant to crush him had instead refined him, and through him, a nation. Nelson Mandela's story is not about perfection. It's about persistence. It tells us that endurance can be an art form, that even when stripped of power, you can still practice leadership, that a people under a boot can still learn to walk together. Freedom was not granted to him, it was forged in him. And in that forging, the world learned that dignity is the final act of defiance. Thanks for listening to Rise Anyway. If today's story moved you, share it with someone who might need a reason to keep going. You can follow the show for new reflections every week, and remember, you can't change the past, but you can always change the path you're on.